still getting crushed and feeling the worst. Anyway, I don't know, what are we talking about? I like to talk about things that I can do something about, and my hold on climate chaos is just, not flying, not using air travel, and cutting down my use of fuel and so forth. I don't know what else there's to say about that, but I was telling Reggie a while ago that my I'm going to be on air saying this. My dinner with my in-laws tomorrow is preceded with notifications of the website where you can download a list of all the things you're not supposed to talk about.
I didn't realize it was a website.
I was just kidding about that. But anyway, I got the lecture this morning, the presentation from my wife about, what not to talk about with anybody and what not to talk about with these several individuals who will be at the dinner tomorrow. So we're all not supposed to talk about these things.
That's a really interesting issue. My opinion is that the problems that we have in the world are to a large degree because we won't talk about the things that we care about with people that we know disagree with us.
And I agree. That's profound.
A lot of the reason I have this democracy forum thing is because I think we need to learn how to talk about democracy with
or anything that matters, right?
Or anything that matters to us.
Yeah. Did you you notice at the end of my emails I have that note? Have you spoken with a stranger? Did you notice?
I didn't see it.
I got, at the end of all my emails, my sign off is, have you spoken with a stranger about the great big fix we're in?
Yeah.
And it's
wonderful.
It's I think it's really important for people to talk, not just with family, but with strangers. The problem begins with this, with your inability, our inability to talk to our loved ones about religion and politics.
So how do we do it? See, that's why I think that's why we're having this democracy forum, because we want to know how to do it.
Well,
say that, do you learn by role playing?
Yes.
Do you want me to role play somebody?
There's an article in the New York Times, Sunday New York Times, recently, a little essay called "Children, would you please start fighting?" The author says that you have to teach the ability to conduct agreeable disagreement at a young age. And he documents the Wright brothers, who fought all the time and cooperated beautifully. And I was reminded about my family, and my mother and father they were dirt poor as kids, but my father was in the service and got the GI loan, and they put it through college, and then he put my mother through college, and they were college teachers by the time they were 30 and 40. They always had a disagreement. They always had friends over to talk about stuff. They went to movies, and then they haggled about the meaning of the movie. And they disagreed endlessly about how to raise their kids. Wow. But it was never a horrible thing to me. And now, when I became more or less an adult, I saw other people have an aversion to this kind of thing. And to me, it was just like, okay, so you disagree, you work it out.
Right.
And according to the author of that article, the Wright brothers savored their fiercest arguments. And that sounds great to me. That sounds great to me. And here we have two ugly trends that are suppressing the ability of people to have democratic or debate within democracy. One is that time-honored idea that you don't talk about religion and politics, the two most important things. And the other is the way the media has taken over that discussion by constantly publishing pundits' assessments of public opinion and opinion polls. So instead of people talking to each other, if we want to know what everybody else thinks, what do we do? Look in the newspaper, and they'll tell you 90% think this, 37% think that. So not only they tell us not to do it, they give us a way to supplant and take their authority. And they become the owners of truth. It's horrible.
So that's our problem. That's great.
That's one of them.
Well, that's a big one. In terms of when society falls apart, that's why it falls apart, because people don't talk. People get angry instead.
They demonize and they isolate, and the more they isolate, the less they are capable of understanding their detractors. Right? In my wife's family, they're just going apart like this because of Mr. Trump, or Mrs. Clinton. And they can't talk. And the less they talk, the less they will be able to talk.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if they can't talk, they're not going to be thinking.
Yeah, they won't understand each other.
Yeah.
That's one of those vicious cycles, How do you break loose from a vicious cycle? You just have to, explode it into something really radical, daring, rash? How do you get out of a vicious cycle?
Yeah. Well, first step is to decide you have to do it. Right?
Yeah.
And then, I don't actually think it's that hard. Only because I think it's, what we think is going to happen is what stops us, or what we're afraid of is going to happen, or, we have been taught to, as you say, to demonize people by the media, and that sort of determines our attitude towards the people we might be talking to. And that attitude of is it fighting, aggression, it's not conducive to understanding. So, if I have a feeling about something that I would like to express to any person, if I come out yelling with an arrogant attitude and so on, that's not going to be successful.
Right.
So I need to learn that it's okay for me to say whatever I think. I don't have to get excited about it. All I have to do is say it. And not yell. I certainly don't need to yell. I just need to say what I think. And that's my perspective on it. I don't need to get upset about it. I don't need to defend it. I don't need to criticize other people who don't agree with me. I just need to say what I think. Personally, that's my personal opinion, I think people can talk like that if they can avoid acting like our TV pundits.
You think people can talk that way?
Of course. I mean,
You need a little practice, but yeah.
yeah, but we've been trained by people like whoever, our TV pundits or news commentators, our comics on TV, to just like tear apart people who don't agree with us. And that just isn't right. That's not the right way.
Right.
You can't. So that's a new way, I guess. We've been talking about this, how we all conform, how we are trained by the media and by our education system and so on to toe the line, etc., as you were saying. We just have to get out of that conformity.
conformity is the evil.
It's one. Definitely. Yeah.
I'd love to know what school guidance counselors are trained to do. I mean, does any of this come up with guidance counselors? Are they alert to?
Well, we're going to have Mel Motel and Michael Zostak here at the next Democracy Forum, which is...
Oh, I saw that in the Commons calendar, yeah.
And that,
Who is Michael Zostak?
Restorative Justice at the BUHS.
Okay.
They're both Restorative Justice, I think, BUHS. I think, so that would be an interesting question for him or for them, because their Restorative Justice, it does not operate the way traditional counseling does, or conditional control of aberrant behavior, whatever. That would be.
I don't think, Bill, that you'll find issues of conformity well addressed in public school, because, you know, from my way of thinking as a homeschooler, the public school is an exercise in uniformity. Public education is built on the Prussian model, you know, the early education bureaucrats of the United States went to Prussia to see this magnificent state that was building itself up so efficiently and so powerfully. And they did it by modeling factory work into education. You get all the similar components together and you subject them to similar processes. So that's why you had, you know, all the eight-year-olds together and the 9-year-olds together and so forth. There was no model for public education before that, because, you know, the only education, the only deliberate formal education was for the nobility, and was performed by tutors, you know, private tutors. And that's how they did it. And so public education sorts people into into uniform groups and teaches them inadvertently or not so inadvertently to consort with people who are like themselves. And I'll bet the psychologists who work there aren't even, they're so deep in it, they don't see it.
Yeah, they're not aware of it. And another thing that comes up, I'm sure, is that fallacy that there's always a right answer to things. I mean, you know, whatever you're talking about is an answer that's the correct one.
Right. There's no gray areas.
No gray areas. Everything else is dismissed, you know? Yeah, break.
Well, the three of us can agree endlessly on this subject, I'm sure. Can we disagree, though? I mean, don't we really test our theories? If we can do it, we should really agree to get together to find a subject that's of dear importance to us, on which we disagree.
Okay, I've got one. I happen to believe that the earth is flat.
Well,
this is important.
I don't mean to hurt your feelings, Bill. I think
So
it's
far, so
round.
good, yeah.
I think it's round.
Go at it.
Well, I don't think that, I don't know if I have any more to say about that subject, really.
The stakes aren't super high, are they?
Yeah, the stakes are Well, can anybody remember the last time you had that experience of discovering a disagreement with someone where you were surprised and where you argued?
Yeah.
And how did that work? Did you discuss it well?
No.
How about you, Bill?
I'm trying to think of a...
It's difficult. Nobody ever disagrees with me. Well, I don't have an example.
I find that most people I talk to, I agree with. You know, that's just, it's just the way it is. Very, very rare that I talk about issues that, you know, as we've been saying, with people that I know disagree with me. I just avoid it.
But doesn't anything ever come up where, you know, you're with an ally or a loved one and then, wait a minute, you said this, you believe this?
Yeah, oh, sure. That happens.
That's what I'm asking about. How does that turn out?
I think that it is, that generally doesn't go well because I have a lack of respect, sort of an ingrained lack of respect for people who disagree with me. So that,
You know, I don't like that either. That kind of person really pisses me off.
so that if someone disagrees with me, I kind of, I don't really react terribly well.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful subject, but it's sort of outside of my normal thinking.
Yeah. I just thought of an example. After 9/11, I watched a couple of videos, I did a bunch of reading on what happened, and it became clear to me that an airliner crashing into the uppermost floors of the World Trade Center could not possibly produce enough heat from the burning of the jet fuel and whatever, the furniture and the offices burning or whatever, to melt I still don't, I'm not clear what you call them. Girders, vertical as well as horizontal, but the framework of these buildings.
Yeah.
And after the buildings fell, the rubble on the ground had many, many sections of these steel girders precisely 20 feet long. What? And it wasn't dealt with as a crime scene. You know, it was verboten for anybody to get near it. Steel all went to China, I think. But anyway, one day I was talking about 9/11 with my brother, who's an architect, and I said, John, what do you think about the jet fuel melting the steel framework of those buildings? I said, yeah. That was the end of the conversation. We never brought it up since. I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. I was stunned.
Well, he's an architect?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has no expertise in, that's more like a question to put to a,
6-year-old.
no, a metallurgist.
Yeah.
He might not even know off the top of his head that, you know, the temperature you get by burning jet fuel spilled on the floor
Right.
is very low, but when you mix it with a blast of air, it's very high. You know, he might not know that.
Yeah.
It might not be ready information for him.
Yeah.
But people ask the obvious questions. They ask the question, obviously, of an architect, because you think he knows about buildings. I've never seen a flame next to his building.
That's a point, yeah.
Yeah, so they're the wrong people to ask.
But he was so matter of
Ask a
fact
welder.
about it. Yeah, right.
Ask a welder.
I was just shocked that he was so
So quick about it.
quick about it and didn't,
He might not have looked into it, Bill.
I know, but he, you know, we were having a conversation, he wasn't even looking into it with me. In other words, another response from him could have been, well, I happen to think that probably was enough heat to melt the steel. What do you think?
How soon after the event was this?
Oh, I don't know.
Was it right after or years after?
Not years, no. Months maybe.
So you might have, yeah, the media by then has already told everybody what to think,
Yeah, right, no, exactly.
you know? So it's very hard for people.
The air is safe to breathe.
The air safe to breathe. we want to believe things. So if you asked him, I think you could have asked him the moment he sees the film of the building collapsing. That's different, because anybody sees that, you know, it's collapsing from the top when the airplane struck in the middle.
Well, it was strike in the middle.
Well, it didn't strike at the top,
Not at the very top.
but the collapsing started at the top. It's just,
Yeah.
common sense tells you that. And then the experts will tell you, well, I'm an expert, but common sense tells you that if it's weakened there because of the impact and the burning, then the collapse ought to start there.
Right.
I saw it and I said, what the hell's going on there? It didn't make sense. Immediately.
And a lot of first responders testified that they heard explosions. Boom, 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 boom. And you see some of the photographs, the videos of the building falling, you see these squibs of,
Yeah.
they're called squibs of smoke coming up
Right.
horizontally from the building. Well, come on.
People don't want to believe it. I mean, they don't want to believe that anything is deeply wrong, and they did want to believe, probably thanks to the media, that the terrorists did it. But something going on there.
We've been at war with Afghanistan for 17 years or something like that.
Well, so you didn't have a fruitful discussion with your brother,
No,
and you never talked about it after that.
no.
Well,
There's no point, bro. I mean, I don't need to rely on him for any information about 9/11 and the buildings collapsing or whatever.
well, I can tell you what my experience recently has been with discussions that didn't go the way I expected. Someone expected an alliance from me about using personal pronouns of people's choice. And I'm a facialist. I use the pronouns to indicate whether a person has facial hair or a bosom, thicker body, coarser skin around the face, an Adam's apple, you know, the obvious features. One group is called the he's and the hims, and the other group is called the she's and the hers. And it's really not about what's in your crotch. That's not visible, and it's not my business. No implications are intended. So that's the way I like to use the nouns. Somebody looks like Woody, has this, and that's a he. By 15 minutes later, I was being called a bigot. I expressed my sympathy for transsexuals, transgenders. They deserve all the freedoms of everybody else. They can define themselves the way they want. I don't believe in any victimless crimes. That's entirely, I have great respect for revolutionaries and with new ways of thinking about things. And despite these sympathies and alliances, I was called a bigot for not wanting to cooperate on the pronouns. And that was the end of the discussion.
So was this an individual or?
An individual, yeah.
Individual. So I wonder, if someone says, well, I want you to call me Green. When you see me, you call me Green.
Well, I'd agree with that. Somebody has a name, you have a name, the name is your property.
Yeah.
The pronouns are property of the language. They're common property, in my opinion. So I didn't want to do that. I'll do it for certain friends of mine, and I'll do it for somebody but for somebody I've already known to demand a switch, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I know this one kid who's wants to be called them. This friend of mine wants to be called them. I've spoken with her about it and tried to respectfully decline this accommodation. And she listened, and she was fine. I mean, this was a different conversation, different person. And that discussion was very good. Mm-hmm. And I learned that I am ageist, that I condescend to her and have a different respect for her because she's minor. Mm. So it was my difference with her was about, it seemed it was about ageism rather than this transgender, anti-transgenderism. That conversation went okay. So sometimes it can work. Sometimes it can work. I felt, though, in general, I don't want to have conversations because I don't want to upset Woody about this. I upset myself thinking this way. I have so little faith in people's ability to talk, to convince each other of things, that I've begun to say that the real difference between people, the only real difference, is whether they act on what they believe. So the only political act that counts now is to act. And and I feel an alliance.
So that means you don't have to talk?
That means don't bother trying to change anybody's mind about anything. Because it takes too much time, and because we really are in an emergency situation, I think. And I've considered that my general attitude is, don't debate things. Only point to make is get moving. And I feel in many cases a greater alliance with a right to lifer, an active right to lifer, than with a person who believes in abortion rights but does nothing about it. Somebody who just wants to talk, has all the right views, is way over there from me. But somebody like my father-in-law, who has conservative views and acts on them, is much closer to me. And this is the kind of philosophy that's kind of bubbling around in me nowadays, and it's a little bit frightening. But I have to say that's the way I feel. I wish I had more faith in debate, and I always thought that I was good at listening to people and talking with people because of my upbringing, as I mentioned. But I find it's getting too late, and we just have to get those people who agree with us on the most important issues: war and peace, the environment. Those two, maybe, at the top. Get people who agree with us on those to act. That's the revolutionary act.
In the last forum, you said that the people use politics in Brattleboro at least as it's self-expression, but that's to elaborate on that. I mean, you are, but...
Yeah, I think that in Brattleboro, people have come to use free speech as an outlet that is, it lets off steam. And that's the end of their action. Our many political resolutions have given us a status. Vermont is the tops. Brattleboro is the tops in Vermont for political leftist and progressive political expression. And that's become the end in itself. Many times we've passed resolutions that don't even intend to do anything else but be resolutions. And we don't act on them. They don't later become enforced. Our new bag ban is the first one that really became law. And I bet we could think of 5 or 6 that didn't. And there are probably a dozen more that didn't become law. And I can think of one that I mentioned last week that was utterly ignored by the subsequent select board. So Marty Jeeser, you know Marty Jeeser? Well, he said, I was conversing with him through email, and he said, leftists or liberals, I forget what, leftists organize for self-expression. Republicans and conservatives, maybe I forget which, organize for power. Even between elections, Republicans organize for power. We organize for political expression. Is this the way to gain power? Do we want power? So we've taken on self-expression as the end, and that supplants action. This is very frightening to me. As we've taken on self-expression, I think the left has also taken on love as a deity. Love is everywhere. Love conquers all. That's a God, and we feel very holy about this, as if we are a kinder, gentler political faction. Yeah. And I read a book.
I think that's true. But it obviously doesn't really serve our purpose in terms of getting along with other people and making things better in the world. It's not working very well.
Be clear now, the idea of love as a deity is not working for us?
Well,
or the idea that we are good because
of
it.
The mindset
Yeah,
that you might characterize as a liberal or democratic or whatever, that has a quality of sanctimonious self-congratulation and alignment with
good.
what we think of as a superior way, and so on. I think the ideas behind that are really true, that, it's good to love people, it's good to take care of them. But as a method of operating in the world, I don't think it's very effective. It's not what it's about. It's just not what the game is about, in my opinion. I think, this is a great conversation because it makes us think. And you were saying, well, we need to, I personally, and I have the same feeling, well, I just need to do what I need to do. I need to do what I believe in doing and do it. I'm not going to wait around for other people and, I have to take, And I think that's the way I feel, and I think I heard you saying the same thing about your, how you have assessed the situation and so on. But I think that the real, what we have to do is find common ground
with our allies or
with all people. With all people. We have to recognize, obviously, people are all the same, basically, our basic life experiences are all the same. We're not, totally different. I don't shit out of my mouth or anything, we're just, totally the same. We have the same experiences, the same loves, the same happinesses, the same fears.
That's hard.
And I think we got to find that common ground.
And then people can talk to each other better.
Well, we need to reorient. We need to reorient. It's not about winning elections. Come on. It's just not going to, that does not work. We've been doing that for years.
Winning elections?
It's about common experience and sharing it. It has to be. Because It just has to be.
Well, I think.
We have it.
Part of that point is that it needs to start locally. It needs to start with the community. I mean, if you get communities caring for each other, then most likely
Yes.
that will evolve into, a wider and wider experience for more and more people, including the control freak Republican types who aren't
I
in that
agree.
ball, aren't yet in that ball game. I mean, we made that distinction, right, between people who are into caring about each other and people who are all about control.
But I agree with you that that's the local, it has to start locally. The most local is here. That's me,
Yeah.
that's you, and that's you somehow, so that finding common ground with people. Like, we've been totally bamboozled by the media and our popular culture, which has been taken over by corporate America. They tell us what to think, right? We see it in movies and commercials and the news,
Right.
everywhere. It's everywhere. We're
Consumer
told.
products.
We're told. And in school, of course,
Yeah.
as you were saying, Kurt, we're told to excel. We're told to compete. We're not told to help each other, for instance. We're up against a whole big problem, that's getting worse it seems like it's getting worse by the hour in the world in general, where disunity, fighting, disagreement is taking over the culture of the whole planet.
I think an example of community would be Costa Rica and some other places. I was in the Peace Corps in Guatemala for 2 years, in a slum area, and the people were very friendly. They took care of each other. They didn't march up and down the streets downtown protesting that, in a community of 3,000 people, there were only 6 water faucets. They sucked it up and made the most of it. But the typical American wouldn't understand that because they want their SUV, they want their powerboat, they want their whatever. 8-room house.
They don't just want it, they've been led to believe that it is their right, what's the other word?
Destiny.
Destiny,
Their
entitlement, thank you.
Entitlement.
Yeah, we've been bamboozled.
This is definitely a long-term strategy towards constructive change, but we have an emergency. So those two things don't go together. When there's an emergency, let's extend the metaphor. When there's an emergency, the fire department comes and wants to get sleeping people out of the building. They don't have a long-term plan. They smash the door down, they get the people out of bed and get them out of the building. They break all sorts of rules. Respect for public property, privacy. Rules are broken in an emergency. Where do you see any signs of our progressive subculture breaking any rules on account of the emergency we're in?
Well,
everybody says we're in an emergency, right?
I agree.
Oh, the world's falling apart. Oh, the country's falling apart. But our pace, our tolerance for radical action, for emergency procedures, is nowhere to be seen.
well, I
I'm
think.
not sure.
Well, I think that, personally, I believe that the way that we have been doing things, obviously, does not work. It's gotten us, we have benefited in some ways, But in general, it's getting us into deeper and deeper trouble in terms of basically our society falling apart, coming apart at the seams, lacking.
I feel I want to cry. I just want to cry on your shoulder, Woody.
Right. It does make you want to cry, and it doesn't hurt to cry. But, yeah. So, the old ways don't work. So we're looking for new ways. We're looking for a new way to fix the problem that we have, which is society's going to hell.
Okay, but just to raise one issue there, the old way, or the way that many human beings have acted in the past in communities, whatever, is taking care of each other. And
Well,
we don't have this now. We really,
I'm not going back that far.
okay,
I'm talking in terms of our culture and our society today,
okay, yeah.
and the ways that we have evolved that have gotten us to where we are.
Yeah. Well, one example of that, it seems to me, is that people don't even know their neighbors in many cases.
Absolutely.
So if there's a flood, whatever, well, this is a little different. I think when push comes to shove and a community is dealing with, tropical storm Irene or whatever, people go next door and they offer food and they see if they can help anything, and they go downtown and help clear out the stuff from the flooded basements and whatever. I saw that myself.
Me too.
So that kind of happens naturally.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
You know, there was a radio lab about, covered a lot of things, but one of the really interesting parts of it was this sort of analysis of people's experience in the under fire in the army in Afghanistan. And a lot of people who experienced that and were asked, do you miss it? They said, yeah, I miss it every bit. And what they really missed was their sense of interdependence, total commitment to each other.
Right.
Which, there's a clue there to what, I think, to what we need to focus on in terms of how are we going to solve this. We have to solve it by being really committed to each other.
Right.
And so, this is a wonderful conversation. I mean, to me, I'm going in new places. Yes.
Yeah.
And
I like a new place now and then.
I mean, in contrast to neighbor helping neighbor, you have a situation, I remember reading a book, and one of the examples was the San Francisco earthquake, I believe. Or another example would be Katrina. And where was Katrina?
New Orleans.
New Orleans. So that was a large city, and there may have been plenty of individual communities, but overall, it was a horrible scene, all kinds of destruction, whatever. And so, instead of, well, it wouldn't have been realistic to rely on individual communities taking care of things, but instead of that, you had big government taking care of things, or the big police force, or whatever. They would storm in with their SWAT teams and because the assumption was being made that, unless we protect local businesses, they're all going to be pillaged and robbed and looted and whatever. So they come in with all these armored vehicles and machine guns and dogs and water cannons and whatever else. No. That's not the way to do it. The people are perfectly capable of handling most of that. And if they find that they need some help, then they can send someone down to the police station or whatever. But you see the point there. distinction. And if we cultivate community, I think we can go a long way toward addressing a lot of problems.
Let me disagree.
Okay.
Beginning with what you said, I tentatively disagree about making commitment to each other our primary principle. I myself have come to use the military as a metaphor for a community. And I think they get their strength first from a commitment to a purpose. I don't think, I think that once you have a commitment to a purpose, that defines the community. We're familiar, I'm sure, with the old war films that, that show the great camaraderie and dedication of the soldiers in World War II to each other. The brothers, they help each other. The Polish guy gets along with the Irish guy, and the black guy gets along with the Jewish guy, and they save each other's lives, and they kill the Japanese and the Germans. They get along great because they are singularly devoted and they believe in their purpose. That helps them overcome their differences. I don't think it's the community. I don't think the community comes first. I think the purpose comes first.
It may well be. I'm not going to argue with that.
And I don't see that developing community, I mean, once you can sign on to a purpose in a second. You can say to yourself, I want to devote the rest of my life to world peace, or the next couple of years to saving the environment. You can do that, but you can't form a community. You can't have a community, a sense of community by decision. So I see that the sense of community is necessarily a long-term thing, even on an individual basis. You develop that slowly. And because it's a long-term thing, it cannot address the problem of our emergencies here, the environment and the state of democracy and war and peace. These are emergency issues in my mind. And regrettably, a sense of community takes too long to develop to address these.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's correct. I mean, if your goal, your mission is to do something about climate change, for example, you go online, you read books, you talk to people, you maybe do a brown bag lunch, you get connected with Post-Oil Solutions, and you go to the climate change cafes and you meet people there. You may have a book study group where you get to meet people. A book relating to climate change, and that takes time, but you're not doing it all by yourself anymore. A community is evolving, right?
I think if an issue came up now, a new issue came up now, the community would be defined by the people signing up to work on that issue. I think the issue comes first. The community develops around it, and it should develop instantly if people are truly committed to the issue.
Well, here's another perspective on that. I agree with you that the general idea that people can be united by a cause and are united by a cause and so on. But I think that if you go, well, I would suggest that if you look at the human condition, that in itself is an issue. That we don't look at. But our existence poses certain problems, questions, and issues in itself that we would, I believe, naturally address through community. And that we would be motivated in that way to solve problems. But my big thing is, in general, the reason that I'm doing this and my perspective on it is, we don't have a democracy in this country.
What?
And we're not going to fix anything until we fix our democracy.
Right.
We can go to as many demonstrations, we can spend as much money, we can win as many elections, but if we don't fix our democracy, we're not going to solve anything.
I think about this every day, Ray. I think just enters my mind many times. We don't have a democracy. How come people are talking about democracy? This isn't a democracy. Democracy is government of, by, and for the people. We have a government that is of, by, and for the corporations. It's a plutocracy.
That's no new, it's not new news or anything.
I know, but
We have made some progress, but we got to get our democracy working.
and most people are oblivious that there's anything wrong. The greatest country in the world, the blah, blah, blah.
Well, unfortunately, the democracy in a different sense, not government for the people, but rule by the majority, in the crudest sense, democracy is working.
Well,
Well,
not in the sense that,
Ask anybody who voted for Trump.
well,
Yeah, they won fair and square.
Well, you-
Disregarding, the rule by government and rule by corporations and the media, disregarding that, which is external to the definition of democracy. It's hard to establish. So,
there are, it isn't as simple as one person, one vote, though.
no.
There's freedom of the press, there's freedom of information, there's free speech,
yeah.
there's the right to demand redress for wrongs committed and wrongs done. But this, and the other thing, there's just so much about it. There's so much about it. Okay, it's a terrible situation. Well, what are we going to do? Are we going to?
Well, I think first we got to recognize that for Trump supporters, the democracy is working.
Yeah, but it isn't democracy, Kurt.
Okay, I'm just saying, about reaching out, understanding common ground. We got to frame this discussion if we're going to get them interested in reforming this thing, democracy. We got to frame our discussion in such a way that it respects their victory in electing Trump. We can't say, democracy's not working. That's like saying you don't count, or your opinions
It's
didn't
like
count.
saying we don't count, Kurt. None of us count in this democracy.
So we got to find a way to talk about it, like you were saying a little while ago. Find common ground. I think Bernie almost did that, because Bernie would have been, Bernie was attracting people from the right and from the left.
Oh, yeah.
The common ground was anger, I think, and there was a lot there.
Or suffering.
Yeah. So I think that if we, anyway, I hope I make my point about respecting the Trump victory. Excuse me.
Well,
I don't really buy that, because you have the influence of the corporations, of the wealthiest people. You have the
He
news
also
media.
received a lot fewer votes.
What's that?
He also received a lot fewer
I was
votes.
getting to that.
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and the electoral college, I think, ought to be thrown out the fucking window.
That's where I was headed. You want to say fuck too? There we go. Indict myself.
Wasn't it determined that she actually had 3 million or 6 million more votes than he did.
That was a lot.
But then, I guess at that point, the Electoral College took over and put him in.
Yeah.
But
Well-
even if you argue that he won democratically by the will of the people, I think you have to look at those people.
Now, let's be respectful now.
The people who, aside from Kirk, the people who voted for him were corporate types, wealthy. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was a fair and just election. I don't know why the Republican National Committee, whatever they are, didn't step in and say, wait a minute. This presidential election has gone way off the rails. This is not doing any service to the American people, to the American history, whatever. I mean,
It presumes that's their goal.
this guy actually, and the American Psychiatric Association, I never understood why they didn't step in and say, wait a minute. According to our classification of mental illness, Trump is a narcissist. He's this, he's that.
Didn't they do that?
Well, that's the least of it.
Psychopath,
Yeah.
sociopath.
He's also
Sociopath.
deranged, and I read that book. It's terrifying.
What was the book?
It's called The Dangerous Case of Donald J. Trump, and it was sort of Yale had this symposium in March, maybe.
Oh, really?
And there's a number of papers, and if you ever want to just really get the shit scared out of you, that's what you want to read.
I'm already scared enough.
Yes.
We
But
think
it
we
gets
are.
sort of details. It's like all of these things like, yes, we know he's a narcissist, but then
Right.
these people who have more experience in the field say, yes, all of those things are true, and here's why it's even scarier. Because he's going to react to things in ways that are, like,
Yeah.
he's not just a dickhead, like, he is actually ill. And mental illness isn't something that precludes a good president. There are plenty of mentally ill presidents, but he is someone who is, like, strictly reactionary and is
Yeah.
in perpetual, like,
Yeah.
14-year-old kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's the name of the book again?
The Dangerous Case of Donald J. Trump.
You already know it, Bill. You could write it.
Yeah, probably.
Oh. Well,
Maybe I will.
there's probably no end of opportunity for people writing books about Trump and how miserable.
Some of us are,
He is.
are good at writing books, and some aren't. But
Well, how about summing up?
summing up,
Hang on.
Or can we get back to your themes of democracy?
We're keeping this guy overtime. I just wanted
Yeah,
to point that
yeah.
out.
Well, the old ways aren't working. The old ways framed within our contemporary society, our political system. Our old ways of doing things, conducting elections, etc., finding our candidates, running our debates, thinking about the issues, they're just not working. So we have to find another way. So I think we agreed, or I believe, that we need to fix our democracy. It isn't working.
Is this what you learned from your other programs also?
I further believe that a big part of the reason that we're experiencing the disintegration of our societies worldwide, in the sense that we have now many, many more tyrants in control of things. The reason for the disintegration of our society is that we are unable to communicate about what's happening to us and the things that we care about, as we said, political issues and so on. And because we can't talk about what we care about, the way is open for very bad behavior on the part of some individuals because the rest of us are silent. And that's what we're experiencing now.